Welcome back to This Day. Joining me right now is Luke Carlson with LS Carlson Law. Thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have you here. And your wife Jenny is joining us too, giving you support. Tell me, does that make you more nervous or less nervous?
Less nervous, actually. No, she's great. So it feels like I'm right at home.
That's awesome. So I'm curious about you and what you do in estate planning and what drew you to law?
Yeah, no, great question. So I'm a strategist by nature. So I love strategy. I like protecting wealth, and the estate planning world lends itself to both, right? Really what it is looking at an estate, protecting it, and being very strategic about it.
Awesome. And so what is your approach or your philosophy with your clients when you're discussing estate planning?
Yeah, so the first thing is just avoiding probate, right? How do we get them to avoid probate? Because as many people know, probate's a nightmare. So the approach really is looking at the estate, figuring out the best way to protect the assets, to preserve legacy, but also making it painless. Historically, the estate planning process has been very cumbersome. So when we approached the market, we wanted to make it very user-friendly, simple, and we do all the heavy lifting. So.
Okay, that makes sense. And what's all your experience, your background? How many years have you been doing this?
Oh, so we've been in business for over a decade, and we've been protecting assets, legacy, the entire time. And we've been very focused on protecting really, homes, passion assets, businesses for the entire decade.
Okay, yeah, and you have, with all your team members, like 36 years combined experience?
Or more, yeah,
or
I would say more at this point. We have a large team.
And you mentioned probate, that you're 100% probate avoidance.
Correct.
So you guys know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, so one of the common misconceptions we see all the time is people will come in, clients, and say, I have a will. And we say, great, you have a will, but you're not going to avoid probate. And that blows people's minds, because they assume if you have a will, you'll be able to sidestep the probate process. But in reality, if you do pass and all you have is a will, you will 100% end up in the probate nightmare.
And so what is the process? Someone realizes, okay, I need to get an estate plan. I want to protect my assets. I want to ensure my wishes are carried out, after I'm gone. What's the whole process?
Okay, very easy. So you'd call us. You'd set up a consultation with one of our attorneys. We don't charge for that, but one of the attorneys would sit down with you and really spend time understanding what are the assets, what are you looking to protect, what is mission critical for you. Once we get that information, we can start devising a plan. And then we'll know what documents we need from you. We'll send over a list electronically. We'll upload them via a portal. And the whole thing is very seamless. We want to make it user-friendly. And in really engineering the division, we wanted to make it sure that people weren't overwhelmed by having to find the documents. And we walk you through the whole process. Then once we get the documentation, we set up the estate plan, we'll prepare it, finalize it, have you come in. If it looks good, we sign off on it.
That's what I was going to ask, the finalization process. So that part is definitely in person.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's a notary that has to come in. We do that in-house. So literally you come in the first day, we could do it in person or over the phone if you prefer, or even Zoom. Once the estate is finalized, we have you come into the office, we sit down with you, we walk you through what you've engineered and set up. Assuming we get your blessing, we get the notary to come in, sign off, and you're done.
And you're located in Aliso Viejo.
Aliso Viejo.
That's close, it's not
like
far.
6 minutes away.
What areas do you, do you serve?
Technically, we service all of California.
Oh, okay.
We like Orange County, we love Laguna Woods, it's our backyard, it's our home turf. And so we've had a wonderful relationship with Laguna Woods.
Oh, good. And so once it's finalized, is it difficult to make changes?
Not at all, no. There's often updates. Life happens, right? So you may procure another asset, or there's a change in the family dynamic. If that does happen, you call us, and we can come in, we can make the amendments seamlessly.
Okay. What happens, well, I guess we talked, well, what happens if you don't have an estate plan?
Okay.
Like, what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah, that's your nightmare situation. So you don't have an estate, but you have assets, right? You have legacy, and you pass. At that point, all of those assets are going to go into what's called probate. And probate really is the government coming in, looking at the estate, looking at the probate code, and really figuring out what to do now with the assets, what heirs get what. And that becomes a very long, expensive process. Now, before COVID, maybe it took about a year or so to go through the probate process from start to finish. Now we're post-COVID, it is over a year because the courts are backlogged. So it is, I mean, when I say it's a nightmare, I'm not overstating that. It is an absolute nightmare. And it's very costly too. It's very expensive.
Wow. So the heirs would have to then go to court and go through the probate
Correct.
of all this?
Yeah, so now the heirs are getting involved. They're being dragged into court. They have to lawyer up. They have to find a lawyer who does probate. And there's no real definitive, you're not really defining what happens at that point. The heirs are not. It's the court, it's the government saying, hey, you have all these assets. This goes to this person, this goes to this person, which often causes fighting. Right? Mm-hmm. There's this internal feud that often arises, so it lends itself to a lot of conflict.
Wow. And then what about taxes? How are important taxes and minimizing potential tax liabilities?
That's a great question. So with a properly engineered estate plan, you can get very aggressive with really minimizing your tax liability. So that's part of the equation. So when we come in, of course, we're looking at, okay, legacy, distribution, what we're going to do with the assets, but the other part of it is really taxation. How do we limit your taxes? How do we limit government overreach?
Okay. And so what do you have to say about the common misconception that it's a really long process, it's really difficult to, make an estate plan?
Well, here's what I'll say. I think historically that is accurate. It's been a horrific process with some of the, I would say, older law firms, historic estate planning law firms. It was a very tedious process. You'd go meet with the attorney. It would be on an hourly basis, so you didn't know how much it would cost. The document transfer was always a nightmare. So I think that was really the older state of affairs when it came to estate planning. We really took a more modernized approach. And so we've kind of changed that narrative where it is very user-friendly. It's very simple, it's straightforward. We offer flat rate programs as well. So when you come in and you buy an estate, you know exactly what it's going to cost, as opposed to an open-ended retainer. Right, you give an attorney $2,500, but it could cost 10 grand. You just don't know. Yeah. We didn't like that. We didn't like the ambiguity in the space. So we wanted to simplify the process, but also define it economically. So that was a big shift in our paradigm.
Okay, yeah, and that's what I was going to ask about the cost. What if that's a big concern for somebody, in trying, to have this done?
Right, and I think it should be a concern, right? It's two things. You're always looking at the legal side of things, but you're also looking at the economic side of things. And so when we sit down with a potential client, we can define very specifically what it's going to cost from start to finish.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. What about if somebody thinks, oh, I can do that myself. I'll just go online and get a, do-it-yourself form.
Yes.
What do you have to say about that?
I think it's somewhat hilarious because we see that all the time. We have the do-it-yourself estate plans that come in, and maybe the client is extra risk adverse. They say, yeah, I went to an online form, here's my estate plan. We look at it, and what we often find is it doesn't comply with California law. Sometimes we'll even find that it's out of state. They set up a California estate plan, but the estate plan is defined by Texas law, which is just wild, right? Yeah. And it often doesn't include all the assets, so things are just missing left and right. But we can come in, even if you did it yourself, we can look at that estate plan, amend it, fix it, and conform it to actually an estate plan that protects you and your family.
Yeah, it's definitely good to have that knowledge and that expertise of knowing exactly what you need.
Correct.
Right?
It's almost like a root canal, like you wouldn't want to do it yourself, but people do it themselves, right? It's the same thing.
Well, do you want to retain your tooth or do you want to just pull it out?
Correct, yeah.
So why or when, how often do you need to review and relook at the estate plan once it's already been created?
So our recommendation is maybe yearly. Laws always change. There's potential ways to leverage the code or the tax code to put you in a better position financially. But it could be very minimal. I mean, it could be a quick review, a half hour. The attorney looks at the document, makes sure that everything is on par, and it actually conforms with your state of affairs. Because you have to realize, too, assets change over the years. Maybe the house that you had in the estate, you no longer have that house, but the estate hasn't been updated. So the review is very quick, but I would advise every year.
Okay, and then then that's an additional cost, like each time it gets revised and looked at?
Well, if you come through us, I mean, if you hire us for an estate plan, we'll create the estate plan, and then you can come in complimentary every year, and we can take a look and make sure that it's up to date.
Now, what if somebody here, if one of the residents, they already have an estate plan that was made with somebody else? is it beneficial to them to then come to you and
Yeah,
have you look at it?
I would recommend they sit down with one of our attorneys. Again, we don't charge for that service, but we could sit down for the hour, go through the estate, and actually make sure that it conforms with their current state of affairs. And if it needs amendment, we can talk about what the scope would be at that point.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. This was great. I learned so much today. Thank you so much for coming in.
Oh.
And I hope you and Jenny enjoy with your 4 kids this weekend. Beautiful weather coming up.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. Stay with us because we have more coming up on this day right after this.